The first Monday of October began like any other at Metfield Elementary, a school nestled in a small town where nothing ever seemed to change. Jennifer Thalley, the school nurse, unlocked the door to the clinic, the familiar flicker of fluorescent lights above her head. She set her coffee down with a sigh and surveyed the room. Everything was in order. Band-aids stacked neatly, the examination table covered with fresh paper, and the faint scent of antiseptic still lingering in the air from her last cleaning session the day before. A typical start to her day. Jennifer had been at Metfield for nearly 11 years. She had come here right after nursing school, freshly divorced, and looking for stability. The chaos of hospital shifts had been overwhelming, and Metfield's quieter pace had suited her well. She never imagined that working with children in an elementary school would become her calling, but the years had proven her wrong. Here, amidst runny noses and scraped knees, she found fulfillment. She found purpose. Her routine was comforting, almost like clockwork. First, she checked the refrigerator for the correct temperature, insulin, emergency epinephrine, and other medications stored safely. Then she reviewed the list of scheduled visits for the day. Asthma treatments, ADHD check-ins, the occasional stomach ache. Nothing too unusual. A few more minutes of paperwork, and she was ready. The school grounds outside were still empty, save for the stretch of jungle gym shadows creeping across the blacktop. Jennifer paused by the window, staring out at the playground, waiting for the day to begin. She could almost hear the chatter, the giggles, the thud of feet against the ground as children would soon fill the yard. For now, there was only the quiet of the morning, the calm before the storm of activity. A soft knock on the door broke her from her thoughts. She turned, surprised to see her longtime friend, Jessica Green, the fourth-grade teacher, standing in the doorway. Jessica, with her messy ponytail and coffee cup in hand, leaned against the frame. Her face wore the weary but determined expression of someone who had already lived through half a day before the first bell rang. "Morning, Jen," Jessica greeted, stepping into the office. "Got a minute?" Jennifer smiled and waved her over. "Of course. Morning, Jess. What's up?" "Just wanted to give you a heads up about a new student we've got," Jessica said, lowering her voice slightly, as if the words she was about to say were somehow more serious. "Lily Tran. She's a transfer from West Park Elementary. Foster placement." Jennifer raised an eyebrow, her nurse's instinct immediately kicking in. She'd been through this process many times. New students from foster homes often needed a little extra care. Whether it was medical records not being updated or emotional trauma manifesting in subtle ways, Jennifer knew how to keep an eye out. "Got any health concerns I should know about?" she asked, already pulling up the school's health portal on her computer. "No, nothing flagged." "She seems fine," Jessica replied, shaking her head. "Just a really quiet girl. Keeps to herself a lot. Her foster dad, Derek Tran, dropped off her paperwork personally. He seemed put together, but I don't know. I thought I'd just give you a heads up. Could be nothing, but I thought you'd want to know." Jennifer nodded, making a note of the name. Foster children often faced unique challenges that other kids didn't, and she made it a point to be extra observant with them. She wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, just the usual, the everyday things that came with the territory of caring for children. But something in Jessica's voice lingered in her mind as she went back to her work. "Thanks, Jess. I'll keep an eye out. Let me know if you notice anything else." "Will do." "Anyway," Jessica said, pulling her coat tighter, "I've got to get to class. First bell's about to ring. See you later." "Count on it," Jennifer replied, a smile creeping up her face. It was a friendly exchange, but Jennifer's thoughts had already moved back to Lily. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Something about the way Jessica mentioned her, the brief hesitation in her voice. It made Jennifer wonder what was behind the silence of this little girl. But it was just a fleeting thought, one she would push aside as the day moved forward. The morning passed by with its usual rhythm. A few scraped knees, a stomach ache, a child who needed a quiet place to rest from the noise of the cafeteria. The bell rang at 10 a.m. for the first recess, and the sounds of children running, shouting, and laughing filled the air. But despite the energy, Jennifer's mind kept drifting back to Lily. She hadn't met the girl yet, and it bothered her. As a nurse, Jennifer understood how children often showed up with hidden needs that were not always visible on the surface. Lily hadn't come to see her yet, but Jennifer had already heard murmurs about her. The kids in the school had noticed the new face, but they were typically kind-hearted, so nothing of interest seemed to stand out. Yet Jennifer couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't seen the girl out on the playground, why she hadn't heard anything about her from the other staff. It was around lunchtime when the opportunity finally presented itself. Lily entered the nurse's office, a tiny figure with dark brown hair tied into a neat ponytail, her pale face barely visible behind the door. She was clutching a crumpled slip of paper in her hand, a note from her teacher, excusing her from a small headache. Jennifer smiled warmly at the girl, but Lily barely looked up. She stepped inside hesitantly, her small feet dragging against the tile floor. She kept her head down, and for a moment, Jennifer thought that perhaps Lily was just shy. That was not unusual. Some children took longer to open up, especially after the upheaval of a foster placement. "What can I do for you, sweetie?" Jennifer asked softly, trying to put the girl at ease. Lily mumbled something, barely audible, and handed over the note. As Jennifer took the paper, she noticed the girl was wearing a pair of knee-high socks, the pattern a simple stripe of pink and white. Jennifer glanced up to meet the girl's eyes, but Lily immediately lowered her gaze again. There was something odd about her posture, something rigid in the way she stood, almost like she was bracing herself for something. Jennifer offered a comforting smile. "Are you feeling all right, honey?" Lily nodded, still avoiding eye contact. Jennifer couldn't help but notice that the socks, though innocent in appearance, were oddly tight around the girl's calves. The way they clung to her skin seemed unnatural, almost like the fabric had been adjusted for a reason. Jennifer didn't push further. Instead, she simply took Lily's temperature and gave her a small Band-Aid for her headache before sending her back to class. But as Lily left, Jennifer's thoughts circled around her. Something about that moment didn't sit right. The next few days followed in the same pattern. Lily would come into the nurse's office every morning or so, her head down, barely speaking. She seemed to be the model student, polite, quiet, not a troublemaker. But each time Jennifer saw her, she couldn't help but notice those same knee-high socks, always perfectly placed, always carefully arranged. Jennifer's concern grew. It wasn't long before Jennifer began to notice a pattern. Every time Lily came to the nurse's office, Jennifer found herself paying more attention to the girl's socks. Something about them. It was as though the socks were a shield, hiding something. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the thought nagged at her, growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just the socks. It was the way Lily moved, the way she seemed to always avoid attention, the way she carried herself like someone who had learned to stay invisible. Jennifer began to wonder, what was this little girl hiding? And more importantly, why was she hiding it? Jennifer's growing concern for Lily didn't subside in the days that followed. She'd seen her plenty of times, each encounter adding a new layer of worry to her thoughts. It wasn't just the socks anymore. It was the way Lily behaved, the way she withdrew from the other kids, the way she always kept her head down. There were signs everywhere, subtle ones, but enough to make Jennifer question if there was something deeper going on beneath the surface. By the end of the week, Lily had come into the nurse's office 3 more times, each visit for something minor. A cough, a headache, a scraped knee from a fall on the playground. But each time, Jennifer's eyes would fall to those knee-high socks, still tightly pulled over her legs, still covering up something that Jennifer couldn't quite see. It wasn't the first time a child had come into the office with a minor injury, but there was something different about this girl. Jennifer knew it wasn't just a quirk of childhood behavior. There was something much more profound hidden under those socks. The first sign that truly shook Jennifer came during a particularly busy morning. A group of students had come in for a routine checkup. Nothing major, just some common illnesses. Jennifer had a lot on her plate, and while the day started with its usual rhythm, something felt off. She was answering questions from a teacher about a child's allergy medication when she heard the soft, unmistakable sound of the door to her office creak open. It was Lily. Jennifer looked up quickly, surprised to see the girl standing in the doorway, holding a crumpled paper in her hand. The familiar knot tightened in her chest, the sense that something wasn't right swirling around in her gut. Lily's head was bowed as usual, but there was a slight tremble in her shoulders as she stood there, waiting. "Lily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Jennifer asked gently, motioning for her to come in. Lily didn't say anything at first. She simply handed over the note, which Jennifer took without a word. As she read it, just another simple excuse for a headache. She couldn't help but notice the girl's posture. Her knees were shaking slightly, and her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Jennifer felt the familiar sensation of concern creeping up her spine. Something in her had always been able to read children, to sense when something was wrong. But Lily was different. She was hiding something. Something deep, something painful. Jennifer could feel it in her bones. "I'll take your temperature, all right," Jennifer said softly, stepping toward the examination table and preparing the thermometer. She could tell Lily wasn't really listening, wasn't really present in the room. Jennifer's heart ached as she watched the girl stand there, unmoving, almost as if she was preparing for something, waiting for something to happen. As Jennifer checked Lily's temperature, she felt the weight of the girl's silence. It wasn't just the minor illnesses or the quiet demeanor that struck Jennifer. It was the fear. Fear that was so subtle, so buried beneath the surface, that it took Jennifer a while to truly recognize it. It was in the way Lily flinched every time Jennifer reached out to touch her arm, in the way her lips pressed together so tightly, as if she was trying to hold something in. "Sweetie, do you want to sit down for a minute? Maybe get some water?" Jennifer asked, trying to break through the silence. But Lily didn't move. She stayed standing by the door, her eyes downcast. The nurse's mind raced, and that's when it hit her, the socks. This time, Jennifer couldn't ignore it anymore. She had been so focused on Lily's behavior, her distant demeanor, that she hadn't thought to consider what the socks might be hiding. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her instinct as a nurse told her that something wasn't right. The socks were too tight, too intentional, and Lily was always wearing them, no matter the weather, no matter the occasion. Jennifer hesitated, but she knew what she had to do. "Lily," she said, her voice soft but firm, "can you please take off your socks for me? I just want to check something, all right?" Lily's entire body stiffened at the request. Her head shot up, her eyes wide, as though she hadn't expected Jennifer to ask such a thing. She bit her lip, a tear welling in one corner of her eye. The silent tension in the room was palpable, and Jennifer's heart ached for the little girl who was clearly struggling to keep herself together. For a moment, Lily didn't move. She simply stood there, her eyes darting around the room, as if looking for a way to escape. The tension was unbearable. Jennifer's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to keep her voice calm and steady. "It's okay, sweetie. I just need to make sure you're all right," Jennifer said, trying to reassure her. "I'll help you if you need me to." Finally, with an almost imperceptible nod, Lily lowered her head and slowly began to pull off her socks. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as she watched the girl's fingers tremble while she worked. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier with every passing second. When Lily finally removed the socks, Jennifer's heart dropped. Beneath the socks, the girl's legs were covered in bruises, some old and faded, others fresh and angry. The bruises were scattered haphazardly across her calves, as if someone had been deliberately hurting her. No, not just hurting her, punishing her. The marks were unmistakable. Jennifer's breath hitched in her chest as she gently placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Oh, sweetie, who did this to you?" Jennifer whispered, her voice breaking. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say a word. She didn't even cry out. Instead, she turned her face away, biting down hard on her lip, as if she could hold back the storm of emotion brewing inside her. Jennifer's heart shattered. She knew then that Lily had been suffering in silence, enduring pain that no child should ever have to bear. And she knew, with a certainty she couldn't deny, that it was time to take action. "Lily, I'm going to help you," Jennifer promised, her voice steady now, filled with resolve. "You don't have to hide anymore. You're safe here." Lily's eyes met hers for a brief moment, and Jennifer saw a flicker of hope there, buried beneath all the fear. It was as if Lily had never truly believed she could be saved, never believed anyone would notice the pain she had been hiding. But now, Jennifer was here, and she would make sure this little girl would never have to suffer alone again. Jennifer didn't move for a long moment, her hand still resting gently on Lily's shoulder. The weight of what she had just uncovered pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, and she knew that she couldn't let this moment pass without doing something, without stepping in, without protecting this fragile little girl who had been silently enduring so much. Lily's eyes flickered toward Jennifer, still full of the unshed tears that were threatening to spill over. She was so small, so fragile in that moment, standing there in the nurse's office, her socks still crumpled on the floor, her bruised legs laid bare. Jennifer's breath caught as she looked at the girl. No child, no one, should ever have to experience that kind of pain. She couldn't imagine the terror Lily must have lived with, the silence she had been forced to adopt just to survive in her own home. Jennifer's mind raced as she tried to think of what to do next. She had to protect Lily, but she knew that it wouldn't be as simple as just calling the authorities. It would take more than that. It would take courage. Courage that Lily had clearly been lacking, not out of choice, but out of necessity. This child had learned, far too young, that the world could be cruel and unforgiving. She had learned to hide her pain, to mask it beneath socks and silence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken truths. Lily's body was still trembling, but it wasn't from the cold. No, it was the quiet tremor of someone who had been holding in their fear for far too long. Someone who had been taught not to ask for help, not to make a sound, no matter how much they were hurting. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "Lily, it's okay. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here to help you." Lily's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her shoulders hunched as though she were bracing for the worst. Jennifer could see the walls Lily had built around herself, the way she had closed off any hope of ever being saved. Jennifer's heart ached as she watched the little girl stand there, lost in her own isolation. She wanted so badly to comfort her, but she knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. Lily had been through too much for that. Without thinking, Jennifer gently guided Lily to the examination table, her voice soft but firm. "I need to get a better look at those bruises, okay? It's important, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." Lily hesitated, glancing up at her with a mix of fear and confusion. It was as though she couldn't quite understand why anyone would want to help her after everything she had been through. But Jennifer remained patient, keeping her tone soothing, hoping that Lily would trust her enough to let her do what was necessary. Slowly, Lily climbed onto the table, her body stiff as a board. Jennifer could feel the weight of the moment settle between them. She knew that every movement had to be done with care, with tenderness, because Lily had likely been on the receiving end of too much cruelty already. Jennifer gently lifted Lily's shirt, trying her best not to seem invasive, but her eyes couldn't help but fall to the fresh bruises that lined the girl's ribs, some so dark they looked almost purple. The bruises were not just on her legs, as Jennifer had first seen, but also scattered across her back and arms. The marks were so extensive that it made Jennifer's stomach turn. These weren't just accidental injuries. These were deliberate. Someone had been hurting this child for a long time. Someone she was supposed to trust. Someone who was supposed to protect her. Jennifer's blood ran cold as she realized the extent of Lily's suffering. Whoever had done this to her had been methodical, cruel, and relentless. The girl had been living in a nightmare, and Jennifer could only imagine how many times she had silently wished for someone to notice, to intervene, to pull her out of the darkness. Lily's body tensed when Jennifer gently touched one of the bruises, but the girl didn't say a word. She didn't cry out. She just flinched, as if she had been conditioned to accept the pain without protest. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears at the sight. How many times had Lily been hurt like this, forced to bear the weight of the world alone, with no one to stand up for her? Jennifer swallowed the lump in her throat and kept her voice steady. "I'm going to make sure you're okay, Lily, but we need to tell someone about this. You don't have to keep this secret anymore." The girl looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. She shook her head slowly, her lips trembling. I don't want anyone to know. Please, please don't tell." Jennifer's heart broke all over again. She knew that Lily had been taught to fear the consequences of speaking out, of revealing the truth. The little girl had been conditioned to keep quiet, to hide her pain, to bury it deep inside. But Jennifer couldn't let her continue living this way. She couldn't stand by and watch Lily suffer in silence any longer. "Lily, I know you're scared," Jennifer said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "But you don't have to be scared anymore. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, I promise." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Jennifer saw the cracks in the little girl's armor. The walls she had built to protect herself began to crumble, and Jennifer could see the pain and the fear that had been buried for so long. The girl let out a small sob, and Jennifer immediately wrapped her arms around her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "It's okay, Lily," she whispered. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." Lily clung to Jennifer, her tiny body trembling as the dam that had been holding back her tears finally broke. The sobs came in waves, each one more heartbreaking than the last. Jennifer held her close, offering all the comfort she could. She knew that there was no easy way to fix this, no quick solution to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on this child. But she also knew one thing for sure. Lily wasn't alone anymore. She was going to do everything in her power to help her, to give her a chance at a life free from fear, free from pain. As the tears slowly subsided, Jennifer pulled back just enough to look into Lily's eyes. "We're going to get you the help you need," Jennifer said firmly. "You're going to be okay. I promise." Lily sniffled, her face pale, but no longer full of the terror it had held before. She gave a tiny nod, as if she was beginning to believe that, maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. Jennifer knew that the road ahead would be long, and the fight for Lily's safety was just beginning. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. The little girl who had been silently enduring the worst kind of pain was finally being seen, finally being heard. And Jennifer would not rest until she had made sure that Lily would never have to suffer alone again. As Jennifer sat with Lily, cradling her in her arms, the reality of the situation began to sink in even further. The room, once filled with the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of papers, now felt suffocatingly still. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath as Jennifer tried to absorb everything that had just been revealed. Her own thoughts were racing, her heart pounding as she processed the painful truth. Lily had been living in a nightmare for longer than anyone could imagine, and the bruises on her small body were only the physical scars. The emotional damage was far deeper, hidden beneath layers of silence, fear, and learned helplessness. Jennifer knew what she had to do. She had to act, and act quickly, but the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. What if she made the wrong move? What if Lily wasn't ready for the help she so desperately needed? What if the child was too afraid, too broken, to trust anyone enough to let them help her? The questions loomed over Jennifer, each one more daunting than the last. But she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She couldn't allow Lily to continue living in fear, trapped in the suffocating grip of an abusive home where safety and love were mere concepts, not realities. After a long moment, Jennifer gently pulled away from Lily, placing her back on the examination table. She could feel the girl's body still trembling in the aftermath of her outburst, her arms wrapped tightly around herself in a subconscious attempt to shield her fragile soul from the harshness of the world. But Jennifer was determined now. She had seen what was underneath those socks, the wounds, the raw scars of neglect and violence, and she couldn't unsee them. More than that, she couldn't let Lily suffer any longer. "I'm going to help you, Lily," Jennifer said softly, wiping the last of the tears from her own eyes. Her voice, though filled with empathy, held a note of steely resolve. She knew this was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey, but she was ready to walk it with Lily. "I'm going to make sure you're safe. You're not alone anymore." Lily didn't respond, but Jennifer could see the faintest glimmer of hope in the girl's eyes, a flicker that hadn't been there before. It was the first sign, however small, that Lily might just be willing to take a step forward, to trust that things could be different. That trust wouldn't come easily, Jennifer knew, but it was a start. After a brief moment of contemplation, Jennifer stood up and began to gather her things. She needed to make a plan, to take the next steps that would ensure Lily's safety. But as she reached for the phone, a sinking feeling tugged at her. The girl's foster father, Derek Tran, was going to be involved in this. Jennifer had already heard the way he was described. A polished, well-put-together man who appeared to be the perfect foster parent. But appearances could be deceiving, and Jennifer wasn't about to assume anything. She had seen how easily people could hide their true nature behind a mask of civility. She dialed the number of the school's social worker, and after a brief conversation, they agreed to meet in Jennifer's office as soon as possible. The social worker, Maria, was experienced, someone who had worked with children in the foster system for years. Jennifer had worked with her before, and she trusted her judgment. Together, they would begin the delicate task of untangling the web of abuse and finding a way to protect Lily. As she waited for Maria to arrive, Jennifer kept glancing over at Lily, who was still sitting quietly on the examination table, her eyes downcast. The girl had withdrawn again, retreating into the protective shell she had built around herself. Jennifer could only imagine how difficult it must be for her to trust anyone at this point. Every interaction, every gesture of kindness, had likely been met with the possibility of pain and betrayal. But Jennifer was determined not to let Lily retreat into the darkness again. Not while she was here. The door opened quietly, and Maria walked in. She was a tall woman with dark, curly hair and a calming presence. She immediately understood the situation without needing to ask many questions. Jennifer could see the concern in her eyes, the recognition of the seriousness of the situation. She quickly filled Maria in on everything she had observed. Lily's bruises, her withdrawn demeanor, the way she had been hiding her pain. Maria listened intently, her expression shifting as Jennifer described the girl's reluctance to speak up, her fear of being discovered. "I'll call CPS," Maria said, after a pause. "We'll need to get someone from Child Protective Services involved, but I want to make sure Lily is as safe as possible in the meantime. I'll reach out to her caseworker, and we can get a plan in place to make sure she's removed from that home if necessary. We'll also need to set up counseling for her too, once she's stable enough." Jennifer nodded, her heart heavy. She knew that the road ahead was going to be difficult, filled with paperwork, phone calls, and a lot of emotional work to help Lily process what had happened to her. But at least Lily would be safe. At least someone would be there for her. Maria glanced over at Lily, who was still sitting in silence. "She's so young," Maria murmured. "No child should ever have to go through something like this." Jennifer sighed, her gaze drifting back to the girl on the table. "I just can't believe no one saw it. No one noticed the signs." Maria's face softened. It happens more often than you'd think. But that's why we're here now, Jennifer. You've done the most important thing you could have done today. Noticed. You didn't ignore it. Jennifer nodded, but the weight of the situation still hung heavy on her chest. She had done what she could, but now the work really began. Lily's safety was the priority, but there was also the challenge of helping the girl heal from the trauma she had endured. Maria stepped forward and crouched down in front of Lily, who was still holding herself tightly, her gaze fixed on the floor. She reached out gently, placing a hand on Lily's knee. "Hey, sweetie," she said softly. "We're going to help you. We're going to make sure that you're okay. You don't have to be scared anymore." Lily didn't respond, but Jennifer could see the smallest of nods. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Jennifer a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could begin to rebuild what had been broken. But there was no denying that this was going to be a long, hard road, one that would require time, patience, and more love than Lily had probably ever received. Jennifer glanced at Maria, and without needing to say another word, they both knew what had to come next. They had to act swiftly, carefully, but most of all, they had to act now. This little girl's life had been shattered, but Jennifer was determined to help her pick up the pieces and give her the future she deserved. As the days passed, Jennifer couldn't shake the image of Lily's fragile face from her mind. She had seen the horrors that so many others missed, the bruises, the silent suffering, the quiet plea for help hidden beneath the girl's cautious silence. The little girl had trusted Jennifer in that small, fleeting moment, and Jennifer couldn't let that trust go unprotected. She had made a promise to herself that she would do everything in her power to keep Lily safe, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths and difficult choices. After the meeting with Maria, things had moved quickly. The social worker, with Jennifer's input, had reached out to CPS, and an investigation into Lily's foster home had begun. Jennifer couldn't bear to imagine what might unfold, but she knew that the right thing was to expose the truth, no matter how hard it was to face. As much as it tore her up to think about Lily possibly being removed from the one stable home she had known, it was clear that Derek Tran wasn't the man he appeared to be. It wasn't just the bruises that told the story. It was the way Lily had withdrawn into herself, the way she had been conditioned to bear her suffering silently, without protest. Jennifer's days were filled with paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with people who were trained to deal with cases like Lily's. But every night, when she came home, she would think about the girl. She would picture her sitting on that examination table, her eyes wide and full of fear, but also full of something else, a flicker of hope that, just maybe, things could change. Lily was resilient. Jennifer had seen that in the way the girl had quietly accepted help, even when her whole world had been shattered. It wasn't easy for Lily to trust, not after everything she had been through, but Jennifer was beginning to see that beneath that quiet exterior, there was a strength in the girl, a strength that, if nurtured, could help her heal. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer made sure to check in with Lily as often as she could. She spent time talking with her, letting her know that she was safe, that she didn't have to hide her pain anymore. Sometimes they would talk about school, about the other kids in her class. Lily had a fondness for drawing, and Jennifer often caught her doodling quietly in the corner of the nurse's office. At first, the drawings were simple: a tree, a dog, a house. But over time, they began to evolve. The lines were more deliberate, the pictures more detailed. Jennifer could see that Lily was starting to express herself in ways that words could not. One day, after Lily had finished one of her drawings, she looked up at Jennifer with a shy smile. "I made this for you," she said softly, holding out the paper. The drawing was of a large, colorful butterfly, its wings spread wide as though it was about to take flight. It was an image of freedom, of possibility. Jennifer took the drawing in her hands, her heart swelling with emotion. She had no idea if Lily understood the significance of what she had created, but Jennifer did. It was a symbol of the transformation that had begun, the slow but steady process of healing. In that simple, quiet gesture, Jennifer saw the possibility of a future where Lily could be free from the weight of her past. "We're going to get you through this, Lily," Jennifer whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to soar, just like this butterfly." But even as Jennifer tried to encourage Lily, she knew the road ahead was anything but easy. The investigation into Derek Tran had unearthed more disturbing details than anyone had anticipated. It seemed that he had been hiding his true nature behind a facade of respectability for years. Witnesses from the foster system, previous caregivers, and even neighbors had begun to speak up, revealing that Derek had a history of disciplinary practices that were nothing short of abusive. The case was escalating, and Jennifer felt a growing sense of urgency. Every day, she was reminded of how fragile Lily's world had been, how easily it could have been shattered forever if Jennifer hadn't noticed the signs. She couldn't help but think of all the other children out there, suffering in silence, their pain unnoticed by the people who should have been protecting them. It made her more determined than ever to see this case through, to make sure Lily wasn't just another statistic, another forgotten child lost in the cracks of the system. Lily's foster placement was in the process of being reevaluated, and while Jennifer was hopeful that the right outcome would come from it, she knew there was still so much work to be done. Lily's recovery would take time, much longer than anyone wanted to admit. Her past had shaped her in ways that were hard to undo. She would have to unlearn the fear, the silence, the ingrained belief that her suffering didn't matter. She would need therapy, emotional support, and a safe, loving environment in which to heal. But despite the challenges, Jennifer felt a renewed sense of hope. She had witnessed the quiet resilience in Lily, and that gave her the strength to keep fighting, even when it felt like the battle was too big. Jennifer wasn't just fighting for Lily's safety, she was fighting for her future. For the chance that, one day, this little girl would look back on these dark times and see them as nothing more than a chapter in a larger, more beautiful story, a story that was still being written. The final decision about Lily's placement came a few weeks later, after a thorough investigation and court hearings. Derek was arrested and charged with child abuse, his actions exposed for the world to see. Lily was placed into a new foster home, a family that had been thoroughly vetted and had a reputation for providing loving, stable care. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best one for now. And Jennifer knew that with time, Lily would flourish in an environment where she could feel safe, where she could learn to trust again. The day Lily was taken to her new home, Jennifer stood in the doorway of the nurse's office, watching as the little girl walked down the hall, her small hand gripping the hand of her new foster mother. She wasn't alone anymore. The walls that Lily had built around herself were slowly crumbling, and though she had a long way to go, there was a light in her eyes now, a light that had been dimmed for far too long, but was beginning to shine through once more. Jennifer watched them disappear into the distance, her heart full of bittersweet emotion. She had done what she set out to do. She had saved Lily. But the journey didn't end there. The world was full of children like Lily, waiting for someone to notice, to speak up, to fight for them. Jennifer knew her work wasn't finished. In fact, it had only just begun. Spring gave way to early summer, and Metfield Elementary settled into the gentle rhythm that came with the final weeks of the school year. End-of-term art projects hung in colorful clusters along the hallway walls. Laughter echoed louder, days felt longer, and a familiar countdown buzzed in the air. Only a few more days until break. But for Jennifer Talley, the school nurse whose life had been forever changed by a child's silent cry for help, things hadn't returned to normal. They never could. Because once you had seen what she'd seen, once you had truly heard the story behind the bruises and understood the pain stitched into a child's silence, your heart couldn't simply go back to beating the same way. Jennifer had walked through a fire with Lily Tran, and though the girl was no longer at Metfield, her presence still lingered in every corner of that tiny nurse's office. Every time Jennifer opened her drawer, she saw the drawing Lily had made, the butterfly with outstretched wings. She kept it nestled between folders as a constant reminder of why she did what she did. It wasn't about Band-Aids or ice packs, or even managing the daily grind of allergies and scraped knees. It was about being the person who notices, the one who sees past the polite smiles and well-behaved exteriors, the one who looks closer when others look away. Jennifer had stayed in touch with Maria from CPS, checking in periodically for updates on Lily. It had been 2 months since the placement change, and while confidentiality limited the details Maria could share, she did confirm one thing. Lily was safe. She was thriving. Her new foster family had enrolled her in therapy, gotten her involved in an art class at the community center, and even adopted a rescue dog, a small, timid terrier mix that Lily had apparently named Shadow. "She's talking more," Maria had said over the phone one evening, her voice light with relief. "Still quiet, still guarded, but she's laughing now, drawing every day. Her therapist says she's beginning to process everything in her own way." It had taken everything in Jennifer not to cry in that moment. She had saved one child, one life, and in a world where it often felt like that wasn't enough, Jennifer chose to believe that it mattered deeply, because Lily mattered, and children like her, hidden in plain sight, deserved better. That belief is what led Jennifer to start something unexpected. One Friday evening, as the sun dipped behind the school building and painted the sky in swirls of orange and lavender, Jennifer remained seated at her desk long after the kids had gone home. She opened her laptop and began drafting a proposal, a district-wide initiative called Project Butterfly. Named after Lily's drawing, the program aimed to train school staff, teachers, custodians, front office workers, bus drivers, to better recognize the signs of abuse and trauma in children. Subtle signs, the ones that didn't leave visible marks. The initiative would include trauma-informed response strategies, mental health resource guides, and the creation of safe spaces in every campus nurse's office. It was ambitious, and Jennifer knew it, but she also knew she wasn't alone. After Lily's case had come to light, several teachers had approached her privately, shaken by how close they'd been to missing the signs. Jessica, her longtime friend and colleague, was the first to offer her help. "You saved her, Jen," she had said quietly, one afternoon after school. "But maybe we can make it so the next child doesn't have to be saved. Maybe we catch it before the damage is done." With the support of her principal and the district's mental health coordinator, Jennifer's vision took root faster than she expected. It started with a small pilot program across 3 schools. Then a local nonprofit that supported foster youth got wind of the project and offered funding. Soon, Project Butterfly wasn't just a proposal, it was a movement. Teachers began attending workshops. Counselors started collaborating more closely with nurses, and even the PTA got involved, raising funds for resources like sensory kits and self-expression tools. The culture began to shift. People began noticing more. And the change wasn't just external. It transformed Jennifer too. She no longer saw herself as just a nurse. She was an advocate, a protector, a quiet warrior standing guard over the most vulnerable. One afternoon, as she walked through the nurse's office and glanced at the worn examination table, Jennifer thought of the dozens of children who had sat there over the years. How many had walked away with their pain unnoticed? How many lilies had passed through, unseen? But now, there was light in the dark places. Now, there were people watching more closely. At the end of the year, on the last day before summer break, Jennifer received a small envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name, written in careful, childish handwriting. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photograph. The photo was of Lily standing in front of a green field, grinning. Next to her was a small white dog with a lopsided ear, and in her hand, she held another drawing. It was another butterfly. This time, the wings were even more colorful, more detailed. But what struck Jennifer the most was what Lily had written in shaky letters at the bottom of the page. "Thank you for seeing me." Jennifer stared at the words, and something in her chest broke open. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of what it meant to be seen, to be believed, to be saved. That summer, the butterfly drawing went up on the wall of every nurse's office in the district. A symbol, a legacy, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful stories, and that all it takes to change a life is one person willing to look a little closer. And Jennifer Talley would never stop looking. Not now. Not ever.